Ruslan.
Joe Rogan accidentally makes a great argument for the resurrection. Well, not directly. You see, in his latest episode with James Fox, Joe Rogan talks about the idea of aliens. He goes down the logic of why he believes the claims of Bob Lazar, who is one of the early guys who blew the whistle on Area 51 and all the spooky alien stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna play you guys that clip, and then I'm gonna tie it in to the resurrection of Jesus. So this is one of those you absolutely have to stay towards the very end, okay? But before we do that, guys, if you're here, you're enjoying this video, do me a solid, smash that like button. Really does help us out a ton. Let's jump in. So here is the conversation with James Fox, episode 1976, and this is at the 17-minute mark. Now, I got to give you guys a heads up.
Hide your kids, hide your wife.
Explicit, explicit,
Explicit.
Now, listen to the argument, and then I'm going to tie this into the resurrection. So just bear with me.
Maybe, and I'm not out here attacking Lazar or Corbett, nobody else. I'm just saying maybe he was used as a disinformation plant that seeds some real information and some bogus information, just to kind of test the waters and the reaction of the public. I don't know.
So Bob Lazar, again, huge on Area 51, saying that the United States had secret tech that they discovered from aliens and this whole bit, okay? And so he's saying, hey, maybe some of what he was saying was true, maybe some of it was disinformation. Now listen to Rogan's response on why he believes Bob Lazar is credible.
Certainly that's possible.
Yeah, I really...
Most certainly that's possible.
It's not my domain.
It's also, I would imagine, if you're going to give people access to classified information like that, you'd be very careful, and you would probably add in some stuff that's not true.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter whether or not, as long as like they have a bunch of stuff that's absolutely provable nonsense.
Yes.
On top of the stuff that's
Yes.
probably real, then they get discredited.
Yes.
Which, you know, I mean, look, there's a lot of weird stuff about the Bob Lazar story. A lot of weird stuff about it. And the one that sticks in my mind, and I know this probably shouldn't because it's possible to do, is that it's been consistent. His story's been absolutely consistent since the late 1980s.
So his point number one is that Bob Lazar's story is consistent, and it's been consistent, okay? So this is something that he is using to say that therefore Bob Lazar was more than likely telling the truth and his claims can be trusted.
Now that's possible to develop a narrative, and if you're disciplined, and he's obviously very intelligent, you could just like craft the longest con the world has ever known and make no money from it and turn your life upside down.
Claim number two, he makes no money from it. He turns his life upside down. So claim number one is Bob Lazar is consistent. Claim number two is that he hasn't benefited from this. Is that the idea of Bob Lazar speaking the truth doesn't benefit him in any way, shape, or form. Specifically, again, Bob Lazar, he's talking about aliens, this whole bit, okay? So claim number one is he's been consistent. Claim number two is that, well, he doesn't stand to benefit. He actually loses from it. His life gets turned upside down.
And have the feds search your property, which they did.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
His interview with Bob Lazar was actually very fascinating. Now, again, just to recap, point number one, story's been consistent. Point number two, he stood nothing to gain and everything to lose for making these claims. Now, I want to point you guys to a video from Frank Turek and the logic being almost exactly the same. Check this out. So Frank Turek is a Christian apologist. Okay, and this is from a message he did called Evidence for the Resurrection of Jesus. And listen to what Frank Turek says and how it's almost the same exact argument.
Did the New Testament writers get real popular with the ladies for saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? No. Did they get money? No, they weren't 21st century prosperity gospel preachers. Did they get power? No, they got exactly the opposite. They got persecuted. Paul had power when he was persecuting the church. As soon as he starts becoming a Christian, he's the one persecuted. No, none of the motivators are here for this to be a grand conspiracy. In fact, why would they then die for a known lie? And you might say, wait a minute, Frank. If you're going to say that martyrdom proves Christianity, don't you have to say that martyrdom proves Islam? No. Why? Because there's a lot of differences between the Muslim martyrs of today and the New Testament martyrs of New Testament times. Let me just give you one difference for our purposes. The Muslim martyrs haven't witnessed anything that tells them that Islam is true. They just have faith. But the New Testament martyrs saw Jesus rise from the dead. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. You see, some people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie.
So here we go. So point number one, they stood nothing to gain and everything to lose in the claim that Jesus rose from the grave. And I could point you guys to a clip from Bart Ehrman, who's an agnostic leading textual scholar, and he unpacks this idea further, okay? Let me play you guys this real quick. Okay, so this is Bart Ehrman from his debate with James Bass, okay, on the Unbelievable channel. We just covered this a few days ago, and I want to point out 2 specific timestamps where Bart Ehrman basically confirms what Frank Turek is saying. Now remember, Bart Ehrman is not a Christian, he's an agnostic, and he's the leading expert on textual criticism of the New Testament. Listen to what he says.
Okay, go on.
They did not expect a Messiah to be raised from the dead. There was no expectation that a Messiah was going to die and raised from the dead, so they didn't expect that. The question is, what happened to generate that belief? My view is it's absolutely right that Peter probably, Mary probably, Paul certainly, I would say, thought they saw Jesus alive afterwards. There's something happened to them to make them think that Jesus was alive.
So here's Bart Ehrman telling us that the apostles believed and were convinced that Jesus rose from the grave. And when you factor in how their lives ended, they stood nothing to gain and everything to lose. The logic here is Bob Lazar's argument is logical, likely to be true. Why? Because he was consistent, he stood nothing to gain, he had everything to lose, therefore he could be trusted, and what he's testifying to is more than likely to be true. If Joe Rogan, or if any person, extended this same logic and the same charity to Christians, the early Christians, the apostles, the disciples, who stood nothing to gain, everything to lose from their claims of Jesus being the risen Messiah, if they extended that same logic, well then, logically speaking, consistently speaking, you could believe and have reasonable faith that what they testified to, what they saw, the transformative action of that event to their lives personally and to that region geographically, that there's more than enough reason to believe that Jesus physically rising from the grave is true, and that it happened, and that this is something that we can place our faith in, and that this is something that is good and in the benefit of human flourishing. So if you guys want to go and watch my video about from the same debate with Bart Ehrman and Justin Bass about Jesus appearing to millions of people around the world that have never heard his name and showing up to them, I'm going to have that video linked over here. If you want to go the extra mile, partner with us to help us continue making videos just like this. We'll have our community link right over here. For us $5 a month, you could get access to our daily after party streams, early access to our podcast, and so much more. I'll see you over there. Peace.